across the sea. She waits for me when she is sleeping. She dreams of me, and when I return, I'll give all my love to her and send her tears away.
Here we are at the Great Lakes Yacht Harbor in downtown Sturgeon Bay. Sturgeon Bay has a rich history of shipbuilding and nautical fare from years past to the present. And we have a combination of the two here today for us, and a real treat for you. And that we have a captain here that is going to explain his boat firsthand and give you a special tour, a restricted tour for you. Let me introduce here our captain and let him take it here from.
Hi, my name is Captain Kyle Freoff. I'm the captain on board the world's most authentic sailing replica of Christopher Columbus's favorite ship, La Nina. And we are here at the Great Lakes Yacht Services, helping to educate some of the public here in Sturgeon Bay and having a great turnout. Would you like to go aboard?
Yeah, let's go aboard, folks. Right. Come on. Here we are aboard the Nina, and we're starting up on the bow, the front of the boat, and let's start with the very front, and we'll work our way back. So let's let our captain here tell us about the bow, including the anchor and our lines, and we'll learn a few things about the Nina.
All right, very good. The pointy part off the front of the bow is referred to as the bow sprit. It is actually used to apply the necessary stabilization for the foremast with the head stay, the forestay up front. This big large piece right at the very center of the bow is called the stem. You might hear the expression from stem to stern. This is the stem to which they're referring. The stern, of course, being the aft end of the ship. This is a pretty busy part of the ship. Here, this is where the anchoring is used. This is where everything associated with the foresail is involved. It can be very crowded. The deck, I don't know if you can tell, but I'm moving rapidly uphill as I go back and forth across this deck. The deck is sloped in such a manner that when we ship water over the sides, the water will run down to the center of the ship and off the sides. So the deck is nowhere near flat. It's curved all the way across the top of the ship. This large anchor is very representative of the size of the anchors that Columbus used. This is an authentic shipwreck anchor from the Caribbean. It's not exactly 500 years old. Columbus's anchors had wooden stocks on this end that could be removed so the anchors would store flat two-dimensionally and not take up so much space. This is the main mast forestay. It goes all the way back to the main mast, but everything else around this foremast, the foresail, the fore shrouds, tacks, sheets, braces, all these lines have a reason for being here. You may have heard the term a halyard on a sailboat, used to raise and lower the sails on the boat. This is exactly how it got its name. It's a halyard. It literally hauls the yard over the top of the mast. It supports all the weight of the yard arm up above. The two lines at the very top are called lifts. They make sure that the yard can be moved side to side and change the angle of the sail to change the shape of the sail depending upon the angle of the wind.
Did sailors have to occasionally go to the top of the mast?
Sailors occasionally had to go to the top of the mast, but not very often. Everything on the mast up here comes right down to the deck. It allows us not to have to go up there very often. If we have a problem with something to work on, we simply lower it right to the deck. Would you like to go back? I'll show you a bit about the windlass and how that hauls up the anchor.
We'll take a tour in the back here. Okay. That anchor looked pretty heavy to me, and also you're talking about lowering the mast up there and the booms and everything else. How would you do something like that?
Well, this is the only piece of mechanical machinery that Columbus had on board the ship. This is our windlass. It's entirely manpower operated. We have handles on here. It's a horizontal winch, if you will. It has a ratchet on the one side to keep it from going backwards. It only goes in one direction. It has a drum on the outside over here. We wrap the line around the drum, the anchor chain, whatever need be. We apply the pressure with the handles, pick the handles out of the hole, put them in a new one, and start again. Now when you get several people, you can see there's several series of holes. We get 3 or 4 guys up here with handles, and they can make a pretty good go of this stuff in a pretty big hurry if the handles don't get stuck.
And this was called?
The windlass.
Windlass.
Right.
Windlass.
It served
okay.
a number of functions. You may have to warp the ship up to a dock, something against the wind. If the ship runs aground on the sandbar, you can take the anchor back to known deep water with the ship's launch and actually pull the ship backwards using the windlass.
Oh, that's how you could go backwards, by putting an anchor out the back end and then hooking it up here to the windlass and pulling the boat backwards.
Pulling the ship backwards, exactly right.
Okay.
Exactly right. If you step down around the main hatch here, the cargo hold.
Okay, we'll take a walk back here.
This is the ship's main cargo hold. This is where Columbus carried all their food, water, provisions, including live animals that they needed to feed and maintain 27 men and the ship for a period of 1 year.
Okay, now, Columbus left Spain with 27 men?
Left 27 men and young boys, mostly between the ages of 14 and 20. 27 people in all. And down here is where they kept everything they needed. The overflow, of course, would have been scattered about the deck, everything that they had to have. Again, there's no stopping at a Walmart on the way.
And they sailed from Spain to
from Palos, Spain to the Canary Islands. Spent about 5 or 6 weeks in the Canary Islands doing some refits. Columbus actually changed the sails to square rigs there in the Canary Islands, knowing he was going to be sailing downwind, and set off from the Canary Islands 33 days till they sighted land again.
Okay, wasn't that a new record? The longest anybody had ever sailed in one direction without seeing land? Without
seeing land, it was virtually unheard of. Nobody had ever done it before. In fact, if you remember, the sailors all thought the world was flat. Most of the educated people began to accept the fact that the world was truly round, but nobody had ever gone well out over the horizon to see what was there.
Was there any talk of mutiny?
Yes, there was talk of mutiny, actually. At the end of 30 days, Columbus's crew wanted to turn back. They said, there's nothing out here, we'll never see it. But Columbus was a very smart man and a good nature sign reader, and he was already determining that there were signs of land coming up in the water, being carried up on the Gulf Stream, and he begged for 4 more days. He agreed at the end of 4 days he would turn around and head back to Spain. On the 3rd of the 4th day, they spotted land.
They spotted land. And that land was?
Well, that's a little bit up for debate. San Salvador, otherwise known as the Dominican Republic down in Haiti, to this day, I guess, has the greatest claim. Okay. But it's never been truly proven.
Well, what about Plymouth?
Plymouth Rock.
Yes.
The Pilgrim landing point. The Pilgrims didn't actually land on Plymouth Rock until early 1600s, 1606 or 8, something like that. About 120 years after Columbus actually sailed and discovered there was a continent in the middle of the earth.
Very interesting. Okay, let's continue back. What do we have here?
Well, this is the main mast. This is the center of the ship. This is the mast. This mast weighs about 3,000 pounds. It's a solid tree. It goes up 48 feet to the top of the mast, 52 with the flagpole. And this mast goes all the way through the deck to the bottom of the ship. It is actually notched into the keel, as are all the masts on the ship. A very integral part of the ship. And this is the biggest sail. The main yard arm that this holds is 30 feet across. The sail, when it's dropped down, will come all the way to the cap rails here at the side of the deck. And that's quite an enormous piece of canvas, actually, when it comes down. Standing alongside the main mast is the ship's launch. We carry this on the deck of the ship because it's a lot easier than towing it behind us. Columbus would have had to carry this aboard as well when he was out in the ocean. Once he got to the islands, he may have well towed it behind, but it was not something he wanted to lose in mid-ocean because you had no way of getting between the ship and shoreline when you got there. So this is our transport. This is their modern-day dinghy, if you will. This is how they got between the ship and the shoreline when they got to where they were going. Anchor the mothership out in deeper water, row ashore for whatever supplies and things you needed. This ship was actually built by a 14-year-old boy.
Oh, and where was this built?
This was built in Brazil, as was the main ship. The Needham was all built in Brazil. It was built entirely by hand, using Brazilian hardwoods. They didn't use any power tools at all in her construction.
Very interesting. And this would have been the sailors' only life preserver, so to speak.
They didn't really know the concept of life preservers or life rafts or lifeboats back then. You gave your entire life to keeping this ship afloat.
In fact, I think I read that many sailors didn't know how to swim because if you fell overboard,
there was no point.
There was no rescue.
Right, they didn't come back for you.
Yeah.
No, you didn't. You didn't jeopardize everything for one lonely sailor. Sailors were a pretty lowly lot, actually.
Well, how long does it take you to turn around the Nina? If you wanted to turn around, let's say you dropped something overboard and you wanted to pick it up.
Lord. Well, we were playing with it the other day, and it takes about 20 minutes. No, that's not entirely true. About 2 or 3 minutes, actually, to turn it around. If you were, say, in Lake Superior with that cold water, chances are you might not still be floating by the time we got back. It's very easy to lose sight of somebody in 2 or 3 minutes out there in a heavy sea. And if you literally had to drop all the sails, turn the ship around, reset the sails, you would be lost.
What were the biggest seas you've been in?
I've seen 20 feet.
20 feet in
I've
this
seen
boat,
20
but
feet.
we're only how far above the water?
About 5 feet.
5 feet.
Yes.
So they were breaking over the bow.
They were
and
breaking
washing
over everywhere, yes.
And you had to be careful not to be washed overboard.
That is correct, yes.
Okay. That's why you have that top deck, and maybe we should go up there and take a look.
Sure, we can take a
there.
walk up to the poop deck.
Uh-huh. Here we are at the aft end of the ship called a poop deck. Now, that's a different name. Where does a poop deck come from?
Well, there's a raging debate about that. I had a lovely little French teacher tell me that it was named because of a glad tiding in France known as les pulpes. And to wish somebody to be pulped was to wish them following seas and calm winds. And in a following sea with a calm wind, the ship would be moving very slowly. The waves would actually accelerate run faster than the ship. And this is the deck that would be washed when the wave came over the back of the ship. It came known as the poop deck.
Okay. And this boat, the Nina, and that, does it weigh, did I read 100 ton?
It displaces 100 tons. If we were to push her literally till the decks were awash, it would displace 100 tons of water. Right. The weight of the ship is about 76 tons. 32 ton of that is ballast in the bottom of the ship.
Okay. And
that's to
what
keep
is
us upright.
ballast?
Ballast is actually, we use hand-cut granite stones down below, and the ballast is what keeps the ship upright against the weight of the mast and sails, and also when the wind fills the sails and pushes on the side of it, it's what keeps the ship from just simply being blown over on its side.
Okay.
Right.
Okay, I understand.
All right.
And what's the minimum water you can go in with the Nina?
7 feet.
7 feet. So there's
Takes
7 feet of boat below the water.
Below the water line, correct. It takes 7 feet of water to float it.
Okay. And how wide is the Nina?
She's 17 and a half feet wide at the middle of the ship there, midships.
So the draft is 7 feet, and the beam, the width is
17 and a half feet.
17 and a half feet,
Right.
and the length
Is about 66 feet on the deck. She's about 80 feet overall from sparred length, and this is where the officers would reside.
The officers, the crew members weren't allowed up on the poop deck.
That is
were
correct. Right. This is also referred to as the stern castle. That is one of the ways that they were able to separate the distinction in classes between the lowly sailors and the officers in their festive dress. They would reside up here. That allowed them a lot of room, unencumbered, to do their navigating and that sort of thing, and issue orders to the crewmen down below. And this again separates the classes between the royals and the sailors.
Were there any slaves aboard Columbus's boats?
No slaves at all. No passengers whatsoever. Again, it was a voyage solely of discovery. They weren't entirely certain they'd ever find India, which is what they were looking for. Columbus actually thought he was in the islands of Japan when he found the Bahamas. Thought if he could just get through the islands, he would find the Indian mainland and establish a new route for the spice trade.
Let's go over here for a minute and take a look. Okay.
All right.
Okay.
You see, these are the shrouds, again, that hold the mizzen mast here. The mizzen mast carries a lateen sail, which is a bit like a modern-day jib sail. The boom, the spar, would be similar to the headstay on a normal sailboat, and the sail would be essentially loose-footed. It's a right-angled triangle up here. It's very effective for sailing when the wind is more on the beam of the ship as opposed to going downwind. And the ship was originally rigged with all lateen sails. That's why Columbus changed the rig to square sails. Much more efficient design for going downwind across the trade winds.
With all these lines and, heavy equipment around, all done physically by hand, there must have been quite a bit of danger for the sailors in the past and yourself.
That is correct.
Today.
Sailors have a hard lot. Life expectancy was fairly short for all sailors. It was not uncommon for sailors to lose limbs, fingers, and that sort of thing, get them caught in a line, get hurt badly. We try to be very careful. We run with a crew of 6 nowadays. It's a little easier for us because we have an engine on board. We don't have to sail the ship when we take it around all the time. So we can sail the ship when conditions are favorable, and we have plenty of room to do so.
Now, Columbus sailed with how many men aboard?
27.
27. And we said there were no slaves, and did all of them sign up for the voyage? Or I think I've read that there used to be press gangs around that would capture people and also go to the prisons and give you a choice of going aboard a boat, which you just explained was a hard life and a dangerous life, or spend more time in prison.
Right. They actually gave that as an option to some of the criminals that were in the prison system in England or in Spain back then, and unfortunately the legitimate sailors that had signed on for the journey basically said, we're not going if we're going with criminals. It's hard enough as it is. We don't want known criminals with us. And so I don't believe they had more than just a couple of those people along with them. When the Pinta signed on also with the group, it gave an air of legitimacy to the whole thing, and true sailors signed up to go.
Was this a business venture actually for Spain or Columbus?
Well, everything back then was about gold. It was a search for gold. Columbus was actually trying to become a royal member himself. That was the way to do it, was to make his mark on something, and it took him 8 years to convince the Queen of Spain to allow him to actually try this venture. And of course, he was a hero by the time he came back. He unfortunately died a very poor and broken man because the Queen never really gave him anything as far as wealth goes. He did get his title as Admiral of the Oceans and was made a Viceroy, but he didn't get any monetary wealth out of the deal because the Queen said, you didn't bring me any gold.
Now, Christopher Columbus made his first voyage in 1492. And did he have other voyages after that?
Indeed. He actually made 4 voyages back and forth to the New World. When he returned to Spain on board the Nina, because the Santa Maria had run aground, he fell in love with the ship and said, this is the type of ship I need for my explorations. And on his 2nd and 3rd voyages, used this ship as his flagship out of 17 other boats.
17? Oh, okay.
So he truly fell in love with the ship and, in fact, bought half interest in it eventually.
Now, you said the Santa Maria ran aground?
Yes, the Santa Maria ran aground on Christmas Eve down in the islands, and Columbus left the ship behind on the reef. It was being broken apart as it was, came aboard the Nina with his officers, and left the crew behind from the Santa Maria to use the lumber to build the first settlement.
How interesting. Yeah. Always went down backwards, all ladders.
This is the helm station underneath the stern castle. It is probably the only sort of protection from the weather that you might have on board the ship, although I can tell you that the planks up above leak a lot, so there's really no such thing as a dry place on board the ship in foul weather. But this is where most of the action happens when we're underway, because this is where we steer the ship. This is how we steer the ship. We use a tiller, like you might see in a modern-day small ship, or an outboard motor that's small with a tiller handle to steer it. This tiller is 14 feet long, runs out the stern of the ship here, is attached to the rudder. The rudder goes down 6 feet underwater and weighs nearly 600 pounds. Unfortunately, it can get a difficult thing in a heavy sea. Sometimes it does take 2 people on the tiller to steer the ship. Been many, many hours standing here with the tiller alongside, staring at our compass, telling us which way to go. Back along the back side here, we have some displays set up that show how the ship's construction when she was being built in Brazil. Here in the back in the transom, I have a small cannon. This is indicative of the size of cannon that Columbus carried on board the ship. He carried 4 cannons. They were called Lombards. They were actually swivel cannons that would drop into the cap rail and were used primarily for a means of communication between the ships to say, hey, better come over, we need to talk to you, or as a defensive weapon in case they were attacked by natives or something. Here I also have Columbus's favorite navigational instrument. This is what's known as a quadrant. It's actually a quarter circle, and around the bottom edge are 90 hash marks, if you will, and by taking the quadrant, staring up the edge of the quadrant to the North Star, the plumb bob will tell you your degrees of latitude on the planet. Very simple, very easy to use. Columbus was not a good mathematician, so this was his favorite navigating tool. And Columbus actually sailed from the Canary Islands, the 27th parallel, straight across the ocean. Would have run right into Florida if it hadn't been for the signs of land coming up on the Gulf Stream. Back here I also have what looks a bit like a cribbage board, or a dart board perhaps. This is actually called a travasse board. The top circle part are the 32 points of a compass rose, and down on the bottom there's a series of pegs, 1 row of holes for every 30 minutes of a 4-hour watch, and every turn of the 30-minute glass and a ring of the ship's bell, whoever was steering the ship would put a peg in for his best estimate of speed of the ship, and above he would put his best estimate of his course steered. And this way, when the navigator came back on watch, or the map maker, he would be able to have a running total of where they had sailed in the last 4 hours. And that would allow him to make his maps and plot his dead reckoning position out in the middle of the ocean. The 30-minute hourglass I referred to would be turned, the bell would be rung, 1 ding for every 30 minutes of the glass, up to 8 bells, being a 4-hour watch. And then it would be somebody else's turn to take over, and the crew could then lay down someplace up on the deck, any place out of the way, out of the weather, and take a 4-hour nap before their next watch resumed.
Hi, this is Ron Trimberger from Sturgeon Bay, Wisconsin again, and we're back in the aft deck, the steering compartment, and we're looking here at a model of the rib system of the boat, along with a hatch cover that would be put down when waves were washing over the boat. We are in a restricted private area that's been modernized a little bit. The original Nina, one of Columbus's 3 ships, wasn't quite as luxurious as the present day, if I can use that term. And I'm going to have the captain tell you a little bit about the 3 ships and the comparison, and today what he has versus what Columbus had aboard the boat. Here we are again.
All right. The Nina was actually the smallest of the 3 ships, but not by a great deal. The Pinta was the same type of ship. She was a caravel, but about 8 to 10 feet longer than this one. The Santa Maria was a little different type of ship. She was a bit more like a freighter, and she was nearly 100 feet in length. Columbus didn't like her. She had very dull sailing abilities. And quite frankly, I think he was good to be rid of her. But like I said, he fell in love with the Nina. She was very fast, very nimble, and well suited for his work as an explorer. We are down in the main hold. The crew of the modern day Nina is pretty much the cargo that the ship transports from port to port. We live in the hold. This is where we stay. We have bunks, 3 bunks on either side. Down here you can see that the crewman gets a bunk. There's a pipe berth in the middle, 3 on either side, and our galley table is directly under the ladder way here. Obviously, when the table's up and people are sitting here, you're quite restricted in what you can do around here. The galley is located a little further aft back here. It runs across the ship, and we have a small sink over here. We have a full-size gas stove, And over on the other side, on the starboard side, we have 3 very large ice boxes. They hold about 1,000 pounds of ice between them, and that is our refrigeration on board the ship. We do have cold or colder running water, no hot water at all. We have no shower facilities, no bathrooms to speak of. We do have a marine head with holding tanks, 1 forward, 1 aft. And through a very narrow walkway up forward, we have the forepeak, which is where we keep most of our tools and things that are necessary for the repair works that we do on the ship. And as you can see, there's only about 5 feet 3 of headroom down below here. The only place you can stand up below is directly under the main hatchway here. And it can be a pretty crowded place sometimes. You might hear somebody saying, coming up or coming down, because we have to do a bit of a dance through here with 6 people down below.
But you have it nice and dry down here now. In Columbus's days, would it be dry? And
No. In Columbus's day, this would have been a very dank, musty smelling, smell like an old barn kind of a thing.
Well, they had animals down here.
They had live animals
and
down
they would
here.
still sleep right next to them. And
Sure. Any
the
place they
cooking,
could find.
And the cooking in bad weather would happen here?
Cooking was not done in bad weather. The only cooking they did was up on the main deck in a sandbox just forward of the main hatch here in what they called a fogon. And you were lucky to get 1 more meal a day. Otherwise, it'll be salt, fish, and hardtack again.
Here we are back in Sturgeon Bay with the Nina, a replica, exact replica of one of Columbus's boats, and we're with 2 of the crew members, and we're going to let them just tell you a little bit about themselves and how it's a little different than when Columbus sailed with the Nina.
My name is Beth Frederick. I'm from up in Marquette, Michigan. I just kind of stumbled across the ship, actually. They had moved our 4th of July parade from the main street to down around the lake shore. So while I was waiting for the parade to come by, my sister and my nephew and I happened to see the ship and saw the crew wanted sign. So filled out the application and I was off that night. So it was like something I'd always dreamed of doing, and it's one of those once-in-a-lifetime opportunities that I just jumped for, you know.
How long will you be sailing with the Nina?
I'm looking at probably a couple of years. We'll see where I am after that, if I'm going to stay longer.
And where do you go from here?
We'll be going to Kenosha, Wisconsin, where we'll be joining up with like 6 tall ships, and they're going to have a boat parade and a few other things going on there that we'll be involved with. So looking forward to that. Will you be going to any
warm climates?
Yeah, we travel all over North and South America and to the Caribbean islands. So I'm looking forward to actually getting to travel around. One of the perks of the job.
Did Columbus have any females aboard his boats?
Absolutely not. They thought that having a woman on board a ship meant that it was bad luck, so something bad would happen to them. So they didn't not allow women on board.
Okay. Are you having good luck since you've had a woman on board?
I really can't answer that question.
You want to introduce yourself? And here, take the mic.
Yeah.
And that's, yeah.
My name is James Leaf, and I am also from Marquette, Michigan. And, you know, it was very sporadic how I came upon the boat, too. Friends of mine told me about it, and I went down and saw that they were hiring, filled out an application. They pretty much hired me on the spot. I just had some things that I had to take care of. Had a big sailboat race that I had to go and race in, and then I hooked up with the boat in Sault Ste. Marie.
So what are your duties while you're out on the sea?
When we're out on sea, the biggest thing that we do is helm the boat, steer it, you know, any kind of maintenance that needs to be done while we're underway. Our bread and butter is definitely the tours, though, is having people come on.
And do you have any modern navigational tools to help you?
We sure do. We sure do. We've got an auxiliary diesel, and we've got all of the regular navigation instruments.
And what would
GPS,
those be?
GPS, radar. You know, they definitely help us out in the fog.
What was the hairiest experience you've had since you've been a crew member?
I haven't really had any hairy experiences, you know. It's not too bad.
The closest I think that I've even come is when there was a big windstorm that was supposed to be coming up, and we were able to hear about it on the NOAA weather radio, and we pulled into a safe harbor, and we missed the entire storm because we were tucked back behind a couple of big ore docks. So when we came out the next morning, though, we were hearing about all these thousands of people without power and trees down everywhere. So we were very happy that we had pulled in that night.
And that was, where was that?
It's a little place called Two Harbors. It's up by...
It's north of Duluth in Minnesota.
yeah, Duluth.
Okay. Okay. Will the Nina just be in the Great Lakes, or?
No, actually, we're planning on going into Chicago, into the Chicago River, and into the Illinois, and then down the Mississippi. Hit Baton Rouge by about Christmas time, and next year we're scheduled to go through the Panama Canal and up the West Coast.
Oh, so you're going to actually hit 2 oceans.
Absolutely.
And, wow, wonderful. What's the longest voyage the Nina has ever made?
I believe it was about 4,000 miles from Brazil, where she was made, all the way up to New York.
Okay. And so the boat, the replica was made in Brazil, and by not using power tools, basically?
Correct.
Using
All hand tools using the same
and then
Mediterranean
sailed
mold. Yep.
from Brazil and started its tour. And Nina was built about how many years ago?
16.
16 years ago. Have you had to do any major refits?
Not so much refits, is just typical maintenance. We re-oiled the entire hull of the boat using the pine pitch tar and linseed oil. And we just did that about a week ago, and it only took us about a day to do. So, but it was 98 degrees and putting black.
Yeah, working on a
coat,
black ship in that kind of a heat, but it was definitely hot.
So explain this tarring process to me.
It's basically just like painting the boat using the tar. So it's really straightforward, and the boat likes to soak it up, and it really looks a lot better
The
afterwards.
reason for the tarring is to protect it?
Exactly. It's going to seal out the water and make it more waterproof.
Did Columbus have much trouble with his boats rotting?
From what I understand is that they did. You know, they didn't really have as much technology as we do, and not to say that we use as much modern technology now, but we're able to actually pull the boats out of the water and redo the hulls and stuff. You know, and we don't have the worm rot problems that they had because of that.
Yeah. Does the Nina have chinking in between the planks? Any kind of caulking like, or to seal them?
It's actually, I don't remember the name of the wood, but you take strips of it and you just strip the wood down, and then you twist it, and then it gets pounded down in between the planks, and then you take the pitch tar and melt it into it, so it seals it up in between the planks, the same way they would have done it back in Columbus's day.
Thank you very much. We're going to ask another crew member to...
Well, my name's Chuck O'Grady. I got involved with the Nina back in 2001. She came into Michigan City, Indiana, and I hung out at the ship and met everybody. And I overheard the captain and the first mate talking they needed groceries. Well, I had a car, and so I volunteered. Every year she came back, I came back to the ship. Finally, one year, it was in 2003, the captain said, you know, you've become quite a regular. How would you like to sail with us in 2004? I said, well, Captain, I'll be honest with you, I got some bad knees and a bad hip, but if we can make arrangements, I'll do it. Well, that year the head captain, Captain Morgan, called me up in the early spring and asked if I would like to go along. I said, yeah, we've made arrangements. And since then, off and on, I've been sailing on her. And it's a privilege. It really is. To be on something as this historic replica from the ground up, the way she was built, all by hand, it's just an honor and a privilege. And this may be, because of health, my last year. But it is a privilege, and I hope everybody who watches this will come see her when she's in the next port. That's it.
Any stories to tell about it?
Well, yeah, the first time I signed on, I've been a bachelor nigh on 40 years, and I'm used to having 2 Cokes in the morning for breakfast. Well, our cook, Miss Ellie, first day for breakfast, she said, Chuck, breakfast is ready. I said, no, that's okay, Miss Ellie. I had my 2 Cokes for breakfast. Now, Miss Ellie is a short, elderly lady, wonderful lady. She comes up to me, about that high she is, and she looked at me and she said, "Chuck O'Grady, as long as you're on this ship, you will eat breakfast. You will not drink your Coke, you'll eat breakfast." And so that's one of the things that's always stuck in my mind. And then people will come up when we're in port, and they'll be asking, "Hey, Captain, can we have a picture of you and my cousin or my niece?" Everybody thought that was funny until the day the real captain was standing next to me. Well, fortunately, he had a sense of humor, and so that's been kind of a joke around the ship ever since. Well, that's about all I got to say.
Here we are with the Nina again in Sturgeon Bay. Nina, the exact replica of Christopher Columbus's one of his 3 boats. And I was looking at the wonderful Christopher Columbus activity book and talking to Miss Elliott here, the long-time crew member. In fact, your son is even a crew member too, yes. I believe. And I was looking here at foods that Christopher Columbus discovered. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience with Nina and the difference, you know, now than when you started, what, 7 years ago?
7 years ago. I've been on for 7 seasons.
7 seasons.
And I started out just as either a month to 6 weeks tour, and that has lasted for 7 years.
7 years.
Yes, sir.
Wow.
And I am mainly the cook, but I also run the ticket sales and the souvenir shop, and whatever I do, can do.
That's a big job, being a cook plus everything else.
Oh,
and,
but I thoroughly enjoy it.
I see here in your activity book that foods found in a new world were potatoes, strawberries, avocados, pineapples, corn on the cob, beans, tomatoes, and peanuts.
Yes, sir.
They had none of this before Columbus
well,
discovered.
it was there, but
it was here, yeah.
Yes, but he saw that when he came over.
And took it back to Spain.
And took it back,
okay.
Yes,
And do you serve your crew beans and hardtack? And
no, sir.
No.
We wouldn't have a crew very long if I did that, no. I serve regular food, but meat, potatoes, pasta, soups. We have breakfast, lunch, and dinner. When we're in port, we only have, I take care of the breakfast and the dinner. Okay. They're on their own for lunch. They're big boys. They can come and make themselves a sandwich. Okay. And that's because I'm busy up at the tent. And, but otherwise, 3 meals a day. When we're sailing, I always make 3 meals a day.
Now you have, I see the big freezers with the ice, which
yes.
Columbus didn't have ice, and you keep the food in there.
Yes.
Do you have electricity that runs those freezers?
No, those are ice.
Just ice.
Ice boxes.
Just ice boxes.
Yes.
Keeps all your food, and
yes.
And so at times like now you're going to be going down to Kenosha, yes. And the ice will keep everything cold for you.
It's 1,000 pounds, at least 1,000 pounds of ice.
1,000 pounds of
yes,
ice.
And that's a lot of ice, and we have block ice underneath, which is keeps it cooler than crushed ice. But it does fine. We had 3 compartments. One is a dairy compartment, one is the meat, and one is the drinks and the vegetables and things.
Does your son carry the ice aboard?
You bet.
He doesn't make you.
No. He's a very good boy.
Good.
Yes.
And what are his duties to help you?
He's the first mate of the ship.
First mate. What does that mean?
The first mate. Well, he's right below the captain. He seems to know every creek that this ship has, and he's also the ship's manager. Okay. He takes care of running the ship and making grocery runs and things like that. So.
But you were on the boat before him?
No.
He's
been on maybe a little over 9 years.
9 years.
And I'm only 7.
So then you're young.
Yes.
You're a young crew member.
I'm a young crew member.
But how old are you, if I may ask you?
You may ask. I'm 80 years old.
80 years old,
yes,
and
sir.
Still sailing.
Yes, sir. Yes,
and then still educating everybody.
And loving every minute of it.
Wonderful.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you.
Welcome back, Captain, and we thank you for the wonderful tour of the Nina. And I have just a few final questions, and one of them is, who owns this wonderful ship?
The ship is owned by the Columbus Foundation.
Which is?
It was created in 1986 to do the research on the ship and to build it as a tribute to wooden vessels everywhere, and also to celebrate the 500th anniversary of Columbus discovering America.
500 years ago, and to celebrate, and it's a non-profit organization?
It is a private foundation. I don't know what kind of money they make.
And you give tours in each port that you stop at, and how many ports are you planning to stop at, and what is your itinerary, I guess is my question.
Well, we normally hit about 48 ports a year. From here, we're headed down to Kenosha, Wisconsin, and across the lake to St. Joseph, Michigan. Then we'll end up going back across the lake into Chicago, going down the Chicago River into the Mississippi, and down the Mississippi. We should be in Baton Rouge for Christmas.
Oh, how wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, we want to thank you for your hospitality, and we want to thank Sebastopol for filming this and sharing it with everybody. And we invite you all to, come back in 2 years when the Nina hopes to be cruising back into our happy waters here. And thank everybody. And this is Ron Trimberger, and your cameraman here is Mr. Chapman, Laddie Chapman, which you're all familiar with, I'm sure. And thank you for joining us today.